Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus.
Next up, call up, let's go Saints. Guided by faith where the universe paints. Celestial saints in a cosmic race. Ladder wave, find your way to a ladder wave.
Oh, sorry. I was just dancing. I was just like, something about that song just makes me happy. Well, good to see you guys. How's it going? Celestial's with us. What's up, Latter Day Chad? Good to see you guys both. How you been, Celestial?
Good. I've been absolutely fantastic. Just we had the missionaries over tonight, so that was pretty fun. How about you guys?
That's awesome. Did you have dinner? Did you get them some food?
So we had snacks and water.
Nice.
But they came ate filled already.
Sweet, that's
just
cool.
kind of come. So we had the sister missionaries leave our ward, and we had the elders come in. What was interesting about the switch up is that before, because of the church policy, for those that don't know, church policy is that if you have two sister missionaries there, if you have a male member of the church with them that's going out to visit home, that they have to have a third sister there. So with our ward and how it's set up, it's uh, I wouldn't say difficult, but it's like on the fly trying to get somebody there. It could be a little problematic. So I wasn't able to go out as much. But now that we have brother missionaries, elders, were here, I'm kind of available to go out to. I mean, could you imagine me going to a new convert's house or someone that's interested in the church? This could get quite beautiful. So God does things in His own time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think people don't realize like how much effort goes into making sure community is safe, right? Because a lot of churches, you have kids that are alone with priests and things like that, or you have like women that are in abusive power struggles and things like that. So there's kind of a really interesting effort that's been done to make sure that doesn't happen, that like women are traveling with other women, that men always have other dudes around them to be accountable. It's kind of interesting because it limits the amount people are always looking on Netflix for a new, cult church horror story, and it seems like it's just really hard to do that if you are careful. You see less and less of those stories from the main church. You'd see that from like some weird cult or something like that, but it's
Like
interesting how much.
FLDS stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's always
So,
like whenever
like-
you go on Netflix, it's always the FLDS. It's never the
You-
And
you always
they're
have-
just like trying to make it seem like it was us.
like it's all the same, man. Like okay.
It's always interesting too, because I might add that to Latter Day Chad's point, antis do that a lot. Well, they'll take that one particular issue where, okay, well, you've had some members in the past that done some shady stuff. Number one, what church hasn't? And then number two, you also look at this from a standpoint of percentage, right? How is it widespread in the church?
Right. And
No,
the other thing is like it's not widespread, but when it happens, if somebody does something to change it, right? Like so like the Catholic Church has had issues over and over again. It's not as much that it's everyone doing it, but is there as much of an effort to make sure it doesn't happen again? I mean, it seems like when they figure out how it's happening, in the church, if there's ever been a situation, they make sure that situation can never happen again. Basically, like it's not possible ever more than once. If someone figured out a loophole in the system to exploit, they're going to break that possibly from happening again.
correct.
The Catholic Church, like, oh well, they just keep figuring out how this happens.
Another reason why our missionaries have so many, rules. When you look at our missionaries versus others, especially evangelicals that go out and the stuff they're allowed to do while they're supposedly preaching the gospel is crazy. But the missionaries that we have, they have limited access to stuff. They have rules that they have to go by. So it's very much good that they have these kind of safeguards in place. What about you, Later Day Chad? How's your day been? What you been doing?
Pretty good. I've been getting over a bit of a sore throat. That's why I left early last time. I had some cankers and stuff, just really annoying to talk, but I can talk now. It doesn't hurt. I do have an interesting thought, though. I don't know if there was a specific topic that we were going for with this one, but
What?
earlier, do you know, I forget his name, Alexander something. He was this evangelical guy that converted to the church and made a YouTube channel about it.
Oh,
Older guy.
I've totally seen that.
Yeah.
So
So I was watching a video of his earlier, and
Mhm.
he talks about Galatians 1:8 and how evangelicals always use that to attack the church and how it's completely out of context because the context of Galatians is circumcision. They were
David
Judaizing.
Alexander, right? This guy.
Yeah, David Alexander.
David Alexander.
So the context of Galatians.
He's the kind of guy who's
why-
like he's probably 80, but I would not want to wrestle with him. I would not want to get in a boxing match. He looks
I was gonna
pretty-
say like 60s. Like he's got good skin. He doesn't look too old.
Yeah, I just mean
Um,
like no matter how old he gets, he can win a fight. Is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I want to pick this up. I did have a thought after Latter Day Chad about something that we could talk about. but I am interested in hearing what Latter-day Chad is
Yeah,
talking
I,
so
about.
I had I
on,
had one I had one. I know I'm the worst. Now I interrupt. I have one quick thought just because of what you just said, which is like the didache is something we should bring up, which is interesting to me. That if you think about all the books in the Bible, one of the books that's pretty much the most interesting that they haven't put into the Bible that should be is the 12 prophets, the didache, which the Lord's teaching through the 12 apostles to the nations. And this is like the recordings of the early church, what to do, how you teach, how prophets are supposed to, how ministers, apostles, and evangelicals are supposed to act. Like if someone comes to your house and says he's a minister, invite him in unless he asks for food and all kinds of stuff. And if he's trying to exploit the situation, he's not a real Christian. And all these different things about rules and like how you can tell if someone is trying to exploit the term Christian and aren't really good Christian. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But yeah,
We're gonna. That's
I do
kind of
know it does have some
top that
questionable
one.
origins too, like
Yeah.
that certain things may have been altered or added in later, like they added in pouring baptism, which wasn't available till much later, right?
Yeah. Celestial,
But
sorry, Celestial, what were you about to say?
No, I was about to say that I really do. What you were saying correlates to the topic that I had in mind for tonight. But the Galatians 1 and 8 for I'm looking down because I have my quad in my lap. Just for those
yeah,
for those watching that don't know what a quad is, I'm so sorry. You can Google it. Just Google quad LDS and you'll know what I'm talking about.
it's
Okay.
the Mormon
Um,
Bible we just have a bigger Bible than everyone
huge.
else.
It's
We
a
have more
big old
Bible.
boy.
It's
Yeah.
and what it is it's the Holy Bible, the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, and we call it a quad because it has the four main canon scriptures in it. And
Yeah.
it's very useful for study when you don't want to like have 4 or 5 books open. I know even when you're studying just the Bible, I'm talking about really studying it. I'm not talking about just reading it. I mean, normally you'll have a dictionary and encyclopedia that may have some Hebrew or some Greek translations in it. You're gonna have you're dang sure gonna have a Schofield study reference system of the KJV. Like you're gonna have certain stuff. You're gonna have multiple books open. You're gonna have a pen and paper. So anytime you're studying, you're gonna have a lot of books. This just
Yeah, it's
helps us.
crazy how many pages they can fit in this book. That's the other
Yeah,
thing. Like it already looks thick. Try opening it. It's kind of
yeah,
insane. There's the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrines and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price in this like
yeah.
little book.
It's
It's
great.
crazy.
It's great. I love it. I love it. But Galatians 1 and 8. I want to read from it. I want to read from it real quick, and then later Day Dad can elaborate. Galatians 1 and 8 says, "But though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed."
Yeah, so a lot of people were against the church because obviously the Book of Mormon was given to Joseph Smith by the angel Moroni. They sort of leave out the point that he literally talked to Jesus Christ first and had many other visitations from Christ and the Father. But what I think is the most important, what David Alexander was talking about, is that the entire context for the book of Galatians, everything in Galatians is about circumcision. Like Peter is teaching, and certain apostles and stuff are teaching that circumcision is needed for salvation. They're Judaizing. They are learning that basically they're being taught you have to follow the law of Moses, you have to be circumcised, you have to do all this stuff to be saved, which is what Paul is talking about when he says that those are dead works. Right? He's not saying that, like, oh, you don't have to repent or do anything like evangelicals might say. He's literally talking about circumcision. And this goes on to the point that I had a thought with what I've been studying. So when he says, if any of us or an angel of light preach a different gospel, the different gospel he's talking about is the law of Moses and circumcision. He's literally specifically saying, whoever's telling you to get circumcised, let him be accursed. I'll take that a step further. So, as many of you may know, I've been studying a lot into First Temple Judaism, studying Margaret Barker and Dave Butler's books on it. We're having Dave Butler on next week, I believe. And in his book, he makes an interesting point talking about the First Temple Judaism, what they believed, how it correlates to the Book of Mormon, and in what he calls the religion of the visionary men, which he also says the New Testament was visionary men. They believed that in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, it represents day one, when the creation and the creator were at one. And Um, Essentially, the priests in the temple saw themselves as the incarnations of angels. When you enter in the Holy of Holies of the temple or the celestial room, you should consider yourself to be an angel who has entered into the presence of God. You're being transformed into an angel. He makes an interesting point that in the Book of Mormon, Korihor, the Antichrist in the Book of Mormon, who's preaching atheism, essentially, that there is no God, there is no Christ. He's also teaching some Marxist ideology about power structures. He points out that Korihor says he was deceived by an angel of light to be told there is no God. But if, like, an angel came down from heaven in a beam of light and said, there is no God, are you really going to believe that? The point he makes in Plain Precious Things is that based on the language Korihor speaks in, based on his familiarity with Alma and the priests, Korihor is an apostate who has turned atheist. He was once one of the visionary men, one of the temple mystics who has become apostate. And that it's entirely possible that when he says an angel of light deceives me, he was talking about another person who was a temple mystic, another temple priest, who told him, this is all a load of crap, none of this is real, deceived him into believing that there is no God, which makes more sense than an angel proving God's existence, coming down and saying, actually, there's no God. Atheism is true. You know what I mean?
All
So
right.
in the context of Galatians 1:8, I was thinking, because you got to re-examine certain things in that context.
Yeah, it's interesting to consider like the rules that they're like, look, there's all these dead rules that the second church have been forcing your kids to do, including like genital mutilation of your children, but there's a broader aspect there, even of like the kinds of rules that they're forcing in the second temple. But hold on, Celestial, you were about to say something.
Yeah. So, wow. So
Well, let me just finish that thought real quick.
Well, hold it, because I can see he's got.
It's like a sentence.
I want to make okay. I just want to make sure he gets it through though, because otherwise it might not.
Just hold on. So, in the context of Galatians 1:8, when he says, "Even if us or an angel of light teach you a different gospel," the angel of light could literally be referring to a priest in the temple. So, even if a priest in the temple tells you to be circumcised, let him be accursed. Okay, and then continue.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's actually that's quite an interpretation. I think that it might be a very valid one, because from the standpoint of where Korihor is thinking, if he is a true atheist, then of course he doesn't believe there's a God. So him saying that an angel of light deceives him doesn't really fit the context of him being an atheist. So that makes sense. However,
I'm warning you guys that there's gonna be some box hogging after this conversation.
There are two things I want to point out about this scripture, and I think it's perfect, because this actually runs right in line to what I wanted to talk about tonight. So, in Galatians 1:8, it's saying that, but though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel. I want to stop there. Other gospel. What is the gospel that it's talking about? So the gospel is talking about the doctrine of Christ. And when we say doctrine of Christ, I want to let the audience know exactly what we mean. So the doctrine of Christ, if I were to go to our articles of faith, I'm sure one of you guys probably has it memorized, but if you could pull it up, that would be great.
Well, I do believe there's actually a passage in the Book of Mormon that clearly defines the doctrine of Christ.
Which particular gospel of Christ? I'm sorry, the gospel of Christ.
So here we are. I want to talk about Articles of Faith number 4. We believe that the first principles and ordinance of the gospel are: first, faith in the Lord Jesus Christ; second, repentance; third, baptism by immersion for the remission of sins; fourth, laying on of hands for the gift of the Holy Ghost. So when we say doctrine of Christ, we're specifically talking about this right here. These pretty much 4 main things, main themes within the doctrine of Christ, right? That's what we're talking about.
They're like the more practical Nicene Creed.
So now when you look at what's happening at the church at this time. Now, for those that know, you two do, in my Discord, we run a book club. We've been talking about the Great Apostasy lately. Well, we just went over chapter 7 in the Great Apostasy by Talmage. Chapter 7 specifically, chapter 6 and chapter 7. Chapter 6, there it is. Chapter 6 talks about, and if you want to look at it, you can later, day Chad. Chapter 6 specifically talks about what you just mentioned, how that you have this problem that's going on where you have Judaism and paganism being introduced to the churches that Paul set up. That's the reason why you have to send these letters over there to correct these churches, is because the majority of these letters, when you read them as a whole, as the letters that he sent to these churches, they are, Apostle Paul is pleading with his churches to get back on the covenant path, to get back square with the Lord, right? Almost all of and it's beautiful the way he puts it. And one of the letters is he's actually talking good about the church, but for the most part, the letters are a reputation of what the churches are doing to themselves. So in chapter 6, it talks about how that the leadership, some of the leaders that Paul had instituted as his journey, because what Christ told them to do was to what? Preach the gospel to everyone. So Apostle Paul went out and set up churches in Asia and Asia Minor. And these churches then started to have little bit by little bit infusing of Judaism, which was the law of Moses, as discussed, and as well as paganism, due to the culture of the Roman Empire who controlled everything at this time. So the leaders that Paul had instituted at this point were some of the ones. So this goes back to a later day. I was talking about how that angel of light may have been a person. The leaders were the ones who were gathering more people into their fold, and they were the ones who was telling people, oh, well, you still need to obey some of the laws of Moses, and you still need to do this, and you still need to do the other thing. And Apostle Paul was telling them, no, man, Jesus fulfilled all that. We're under a new law. So what I wanted to talk about tonight that ties into all of this is actually Alma 41, for those that may have their Book of Mormon with them. Alma 41 talks specifically about what we're dealing with in these times. Alma 41 verse 11, if you want to pull it up. It says, and this is Alma, I believe he's talking to his son, Branson, and his son had some problems. He had some sexual problems with some people when he was sent to go preach. So he was sent basically on a mission and had some serious problems. Verse 11 says, now my son, all men that are in a state of nature, or I would say in a carnal state, are in the gall of bitterness and in the bonds of iniquity. They are without God in the world, and they have gone contrary to the nature of God. Therefore, they are in a state contrary to the nature of happiness. Here, it shows that when you are going apostate, basically when you are going against the nature of God, you're going against happiness. Happiness is a part of this whole thing that we get to enjoy in life. The whole point of life is to have joy. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining our happiness. And the only way to do that is to cleave to the nature of God. So what we're seeing in the world nowadays is we're seeing people who love their self, right? They love their money. They love the things that they can get. They love their jobs or their cars or their homes or whatever it is that you have, pride in. And this becomes stuff that satisfies them. You start taking some of that stuff away and they don't have contentment anymore. And they don't have assurance that, this Heavenly Father that gave them all these blessings will continue to bless them and help them through the rough time, because their faith is fundamentally based in something that is not everlasting. It's not eternal. So because it's not eternal, they will get shaken. So a lot of people out there right now that are atheists and transgender problems and all these other problems that society is facing, it's simply because they wonder why they're not happy. It's because they're going against the very nature of God. I think in some previous verses above it was talking about how that, God's will doesn't change. Like the plan doesn't just change because you want it to, right? We can't just pick and choose and cherry pick what parts of the doctrine we like and what parts of the doctrine we don't like. And so I think here, the other doctrine that's being preached, we're not preaching a different doctrine than Christ. or anyone that says so, you haven't read the Book of Mormon, because the Book of Mormon is specifically tells you to do everything that Jesus does. Did Jesus get baptized? Did Jesus go out and teach and preach other people in their homes and outside of their homes? Have dinner with people that he didn't know? Yes, he did. Did he help out the poor? Yes, he did. Did he help heal the sick? Yes, he did. So all of the things that Jesus Christ taught and tell us to do, to have love to one another and all that kind of good stuff, are we doing that? Yes, we are. And like I said, for those antis out there that may say, well, no, you're not. Look at all the scandals in your church. They're not widespread. It's like less than 1% of the church that's in this scandalous mode. And most of the time they're caught beforehand and excommunicated. So you have this problem that they say we're teaching a different doctrine, but we're the happy ones. They're the unhappy ones. And they're the ones that are teaching a different doctrine than Christ, not us. We're teaching exactly what Christ said. And I think that if you have, the devil comes in a guise of light. I think any person that knows anything about like mysticism or paganism or anything like that can tell you they held Lucifer as the god of light. And this Lucifer, he doesn't, the devil does not tempt you with the ugly because you don't like ugly. He tempts you with the pretty because that's what you like. So, he comes at you with these smooth, soothing words. There's no God. There's no this. There's no that. You don't have to worry about anything. Everything's going to be okay. Or if he knows that you're super religious, he just tells you to basically just, get by. You don't have to really do much. Just believe in Jesus, and that's all that's required. Don't change yourself. Keep sinning. You can believe in Jesus. Sure, go to church, whatever. But just keep sinning. It's no problem. So when you're sinning without a heart of repentance, it's a problem. When you want to fix it, when you want to try to do better, that's whenever, because everybody's going to fall. But when you want to try to do better, that's what Christ taught. He taught us to take ownership of what we have and to try to fix ourselves and do better. So I just wanted to add in that
Let me
crazy.
also. All right. So I owe these guys a little bit of a box saga. We'll get that going real quick.
Super chats.
Yeah.
There's also another one in the chat that I actually want to read. So there's someone in the chat talking about like us adding on to the Bible and stuff. First off, Revelations is not the last book of the Bible written chronologically. Chronologically, the first books written were actually the epistles of Paul and the Gospels. But Jesus Christ himself says that all of the words he spoke that were written down, it would not be enough to the world.
As a rule, someone pays for the super chat.
That is such a song. Why would someone request this song in the middle? So that tells me the person who requested that song is not a member of the church.
This is true. However, what's weird to me is like 90% of the Mormons I've met really love metal. So it's like, but yeah, it's true.
Okay, so that's my little secret is I actually enjoy heavy metal to an extent.
That's the thing. They're like trying to upset me, and I like it.
I'm a pro musician. So I mean, you're gonna have to find.
You're gonna see through it to the actual music. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm gonna see through the message to get the music. But for those that were watching, who were saints and felt disturbed by that, don't, because that's what that person wanted you to feel. They wanted you to feel. And here's another thing. Look at this. This is so pretty. Why would I, as a human being, do something or say something intentionally with the mindset that this is going, I know that this is going to hurt or could emotionally hurt someone else? And no matter how small that damage may be, like when you're doing that, if you want to, well, let's take God out of the picture, fine. When you're doing that, you're sending negative energy, negative karma, negative, whatever you want to call it. You're sending that negativity out where you think it's going to come back to you. We do have cause and effect in this world, ladies and gentlemen. And whether you believe in God or not, There are certain laws and principles in effect that you just can't escape. If you're an atheist, or whether you believe in God, you jump off a building, you're going to fall to the floor and it's going to hurt. So, there are things that operate in this world outside of the sphere of your opinion.
Right.
So
I think
one of
also of Jesus though, right? Like, because Jesus had to
Yeah.
remember there's like the millionaire or like the rich guy, and Jesus, rocks his boat. He's like, yeah, you're probably gonna have to like sell everything you have and actually start following me, and that applies on so many levels. But even just the idea that you have to be able to handle being shaken, and like it doesn't have to be ungrounding. And it's interesting, some people are so easily ungrounded, and it's interesting the people that aren't and what it is like that keeps someone solid in chaos, right? Because that's, I think, a huge test in our reality is if you can handle the chaos that everything is trying to throw on you and still stay balanced. And people are constantly looking at how can I emulate somebody or something in nature that is able to handle itself and not react and just become whatever something else is, because everything is being pushed in order that it reacts, because they know that they can make you react the way they want you to react. So like, oh yeah, do what you want, just react how you want to act,
Yeah, it's a huge problem, because you have a society now that's basically like, okay, fine, I can just do whatever I wanted. When you don't have the thought of what I'm doing or saying is going to hurt someone else, now you've adopted a social norm of, I can be rude and it's fine. I can be obnoxious and it's fine. I can be downright aggressive and it's fine. I don't have to worry about that. But see, everybody wants to know. In Revelation, it says that at the last day we're going to be judged by our what? I bet you that
Does it say by our grace? By the
no,
grace we receive, that's how we're judged?
that's
If
not what it
we
says. That's
and
not what
and
it
we'll go to hell if we believe in doing any sort of good works?
dude. If you don't
no.
recite the Nicene
That's what
Creed, right?
Pastor Bob told me, guys. And I know he's God's chosen servant, Pastor Bob, from down the
Wow.
street.
Well, Pastor Bob down the street is so wrong.
Oh no.
Revelation says that we will be judged by our works. Now, what works is it talking about? Because I just got through saying that when you say something negative like that, you're pushing out negativity. When you're saying something or doing something negative to someone and it's negative, that you're going to get that back. So what's the work you're being judged on? The work you're being judged on is everything that you've done negative is a byproduct of the deficiencies within yourself that you have not corrected or fixed. So if you're hanging on to some past trauma or to some anger or to something that happened to you, then your response in this world when it bombards you with stuff is to lash out or to try to hide your scars with something um, facadical or something like that. So the work that's being judged is an inward work. It's what have you done to fix self to the point to where you emulate Christ, right? The word Christian means Christ-like, to be like Christ. So how far along on that path? I think I mentioned this earlier on the last live stream I was on, that at the end you're going to be a place where you're comfortable. Comfortable. If you haven't at all in your entire life tried to be good, tried to be like Christ, try not to hurt other people's feelings and to blatantly disregard other people's religion, or because I don't do that, whether I disagree with Catholics, Protestants, or whatever, evangelicals or Calvinists, I may disagree with them on a lot of theological basis, but one thing I'll never do is just bash them for being what they are. But we get it all the time. People bash us all the time. And what you're doing when you're doing that is, do you think Christ does that? I mean, say we were wrong in the second coming. We tried our hardest. We did good. We worship Heavenly Father through Jesus Christ, and we did everything that Jesus Christ asked to do. But say that some part of our doctrine is wrong, and the second coming happens. Do you think Jesus won't be well pleased with our work? Of course he will be. Of course he will be, because we did preach a different doctrine. We preached what he told us to, and we did what he asked us to. And so when we're judged at the end, we're going to be judged on our work, and it's an inward work. It's not anything like you helping a lady across the street is a result of you being a good person on the inside, not the other way around. Because you helped the lady across the street, you are a good person.
You
And
know,
I
that
think,
reminds me of something actually.
yeah,
Um, so are you guys familiar with that 52 churches in 52 weeks guy and how he got baptized?
no,
So I was aware of it like a year ago from my mom. Um, but basically, there was a guy who was a Protestant. He made a YouTube channel to go to a different church every week. He ended up going to the LDS church. This was like a year ago, and now the other day he just got baptized in that church
nice,
because he
nice.
got signs and revelation from God that it was true. But anyways, about a year ago, he uploads a video going to general conference for the first time as a non-member. And one thing he points out that's really interesting is he's talking about how he's going into the conference. He's talking about all the protesters outside, the ones always the Pastor Bob squad screaming at us, telling us we're going to go to hell, um, as if they have the divine authority to say that.
Oh my God.
And he's talking about how it reminds him of Lehi's dream in the Book of Mormon when he first started reading that. He's like, it's really
Mm,
interesting because you've got this iron rod leading into the conference center, and then this mob of people mocking you and belittling you on the outside. And then when you go inside, it's just peaceful and there's a statue of Jesus Christ, right? And it reminds me a lot of what you're saying.
yeah, absolutely. The people that are mocking us and berating us are the people that are in that big spacious building. For those that want to know exactly what we're talking about, I know there's probably a lot of people in the chat who've never even read the Book of Mormon. You can get a free PDF version on the website. I would go to First Nephi 8 chapter to pick up the reference of what Latterwave Chad just was talking about. That is the Tree of Life Vision by Lehi. It is probably
You
the
want to
most famous.
I'll do
want to know
one
what makes that
better.
better?
We could. Some of our friends are in the Book of Mormon, the live action movie series for free on YouTube. I
There
actually
you
would.
go.
I would say like it's probably worth it if you want to see like Brad Whitbeck play Mosiah. It'll blow your freaking mind. Okay,
Yeah,
I get really
I,
excited.
I think my sister used to be in his ward or something, my mom said. And then when she first started showing me ward radio, she's like, yeah, that's the guy in the Book of Mormon movies that was in your sister's ward or whatever.
So I became friends with him after watching it, and I was like, I'd seen him in the movie, and then later on, I saw him on Ward Radio, and like when he was first on Ward Radio, he was doing the movie, so he had this huge beard for playing Mosiah, and I just thought, like, what a weird, he's just maybe Mormons love now big beards because it's been a while since like Brigham Young University wouldn't let you have a beard, and like now all of a sudden he's like going full deacon or something like that. And then found out no, he's just trying to be an ancient biblical character for a while.
Yeah,
so
it's interesting.
talking about
Um,
entertainment, I might end up being on a on one of the musical releases. I know that sometimes the church
Yes,
sends out like little albums or whatever.
that's what we're
So
waiting for. I don't know if you guys have heard Celestial play the saxophone yet, but it's quite I was gonna say quite a sight, but it's quite a sound, I guess is the correct term.
I appreciate that. But it's so my elder quorum president, President Kent. You've heard me mention him several times. I love him. He's like my big brother in the church. Um, his daughter, one of the oldest, I think second to oldest, plays the piano really well. She wanted to do like a saxophone piano duet for the. They sent out an email requesting for members to send in music. So I don't. It's not set in stone or nothing, but I know that I've been my stuff has been circulated around the church and
That would be
some
awesome for them if they were. I mean, to
yeah
be honest, it's like they could use some real music. That's the thing. The church needs good music. That's the smart thing. I don't know. It's interesting looking at the Didache because of the rules, because we talked a bit about like what are the rules you're supposed to follow, and the works are a major thing. It talks about the way of life, the way of death, choosing the path of righteousness to avoid sins. There's like some more emphasis on the golden rule that's more interesting. And it's interesting how it's kind of been written out, and the way we talk about the golden rule now is very different because the way we look at the golden rule now is like do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but really it's treat others as you would have them treat you, which is totally different because one is to put them through certain kinds of regulations and rules and everything, and the other one is like to
right
treat you kindly, which is more
correct
what Celestial's saying. The other thing is prayer and fasting. I think like the things here that you have to do are the things LDS are doing, right? This is not the rules of the Catholic Church. And so it's kind of sad that they've lost the Didache. I think the Didache is pretty practical. And especially because the history of the way Christians first were like, all right, what do we do with this?
The Catholic Church has lost a lot, actually. So in studying the Great Apostasy and with my degrees within the Templars, one of the things that I know for a fact is that the church has evolved tremendously. I'm talking about the Catholic Church here. The Catholic Church has evolved tremendously in a very bad way. Not in a good way. And I'm speaking purely historically. This is not a hit on the members. I'm talking about the organization of the Catholic Church, okay? Not the members, the organization of the Catholic Church. It has shifted to some very, very bad places, partly due to the fact that it originated from some pretty shady stuff. So I won't bore you guys with the details.
Here's an interesting little question I was talking about earlier. So, Catholics, they claim that Peter was the first pope. He was the Bishop of Rome. However, you can't really find any sources of Peter being in Rome. There's some, second, third-hand sources saying he was executed in Rome. However, if Peter was the Bishop of Rome, don't you think he would have been brought up at some point in the letter to the Romans? And don't you think that the Romans, in the letter to the Romans, they would have been like circumcising people or something, like all the other people that were under Peter? Don't you think Paul, with his beef with Peter, would have addressed that if Peter was like the leader of the Roman Church?
Paul definitely would have addressed it. Like no cap. Like Paul definitely. So for those that don't know, Paul and Peter, they loved each other through, because they were both Christians. They did love each other. They did have an admiration for each other. There were certain disputes they had over doctrine that, kind of made them one of those things where if they're in the room together, you got two lions of doctrine. You know what I mean? You got two lions of doctrine in the room at the same time. Both of them have a bit of an ego. It's going to clash a little bit. It's fine. But within the church, we are allowed to have those kind of pivotal doctrinal discussions because we are members and we understand where the lines are, right? We know when not to cross, what not to say, and how to approach our brothers and sisters in Christ. So with that understanding, Paul and Peter, they had some problems, doctrinally speaking. But as far as like an application of getting the word out, they were on very good terms.
Yeah, but the idea of Peter being the seat of the
Roman
church,
bishop.
right? Exactly. Like this is the
if he was the Roman bishop, Paul would have said something about it in Rome, and there would have been some sort of beef going on with circumcision or something.
Sure.
Because the whole thing with the letter to the Galatians was literally Peter, amongst other people, teaching them that they had to be circumcised, right? So don't you think he would have been teaching that to the Gentiles in Rome? And Paul would have brought that up if he was the head of the Roman church? But no, there's no evidence that Linus ever had hands laid on him to confer the priesthood.
And again, that goes back to like you're saying, Peter promoting circumcision. That's actually adding to the apostasy. So what you have here is it goes back to the fact that people within that church or whatever organization he's around were influencing their leaders, and the leaders were influencing the people to such a degree that little things like this were getting brought back into. And you got to understand, this was not, it's like an old drug habit, man. Like these people were addicted to Judaism. They were.
Yeah,
They've been.
but also, like, what is Judaism? Because you've got Egyptian slavery, magic, all these weird priesthood stuff that's come out of Egypt. That some of that is esoterically being practiced by the Second Temple.
Did you know that the Hebrews spent 400 years? I'm going to repeat that: 400 years in Egypt. That's 4 generations. 4 generations of Israelites born and raised in Egypt. So, yeah, they knew of the customs of Egypt, and they, to some degree, I would say, picked up a lot of those. How could you not?
Right. Yeah.
Picked up some of that stuff. So Reformed Egyptian and all this kind of stuff. Like, how else would a Hebrew write Egyptian? He wasn't born Egyptian. He doesn't know that. He was a slave during this. Their ancestors were slaves in Egypt during this time period. So there's no way to know for sure um, how to write this Egypt. But now all of a sudden we have a way to somewhat kind of write it down. That's where you get Reformed Egyptian from. And there are other links. Um, I like to reference Akhenaten to that because it actually goes way, 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 way back to a time period where they tried to like erase monotheism out of Egypt once and for all. So for the Israelites, and this was another reason why the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, wanted to kill off the baby boys so bad because they knew that monotheism inside of Egypt didn't work. It was bad, and they knew that their priests would get weary and they would get worried about an uprising, and that's exactly why the king wanted to take them out because they had seen this before. They had seen their history books had knowledge of this. Of course, the pharaohs coming in knew the other pharaohs' history. So,
well, it's crazy when I've done some look into this. I'm pretty convinced of the Moses Akhenaten link, right? There's a lot of archaeologists who've done this, but if you look at the history of this, it's supposed to be 13th century historicity is supposed to have happened in 13th century BC. There's a timeline historical figure 13th century BC, but they kind of moved it anyway. 13th century 1350s and 1336 into 14th century, like the exact same time. You got this story of a brother to a pharaoh, essentially, who's coming from the Yuya tradition. So here's Yuya is been associated with Joseph in the Bible. This idea that the Technicolor Dreamcoat Joseph, or the pattern of many colors, this person ended up as an advisor, a grand vizier to the pharaoh,
correct.
married
Yes.
into the family. And
Yes.
that's exactly the story of Joseph, right? So a lot of people have associated this is also a century or so before, just a generation before Moses, right? So looking at this idea that Moses is a character who was very important in Egyptian mythology and Egyptian history as well, because he was raised as the brother of the pharaoh, right? And basically to be the pharaoh. So you've got a guy who is Jewish by blood, but he's also speaking Egyptian. If he's raised to be the pharaoh, he's able to speak in the court.
He knows Egyptian. Come on, he was a prince. He knows knows the language.
He probably doesn't know Hebrew as well as he knows Egyptian. I mean, it's you know what I mean? And this is something that
Well, didn't
shows
he
up.
like live with like the Canaanites for like 20 years before God appeared to him?
After he was kicked out of the Egyptian courts. And the other thing that's interesting is that they say he has like lost his tongue. So some associate that with having his tongue cut out in Egypt for going, but others say it's that he just was never able to speak Hebrew as clearly as Aaron is, so in other words, he had to rely on others to speak more clearly for him on his behalf to his people.
So I want to add something to that. It's actually, from what I've read and researched, it's actually quite the opposite. He lost his tongue, meaning that he lost that slang, so to speak. Like he lost that what's the word I'm looking for? It's escaping me. Accent. There it is. He lost that Egyptian accent because I think it was towards the wilderness of Sinai, where you pick him up speaking heavy Hebrew. So it wasn't that he couldn't speak Hebrew anymore. It was actually that he lost, and when he left out of Egypt, he lost that Egyptian kind of tang to his voice. Then you also have you pick up where Moses, there's a verse where it talks about how Moses was very, very much um, like a stutterer. Like he wasn't someone who was very eloquent with his words. I think at the burning bush, he even mentioned that to me. It's funny. So no matter how astute you are in the gospel, or no matter like what your placement is, typically when the Holy Ghost tells you to do something, you have this like argumentative period where you're sitting there and you're having this debate. You're just like, nah, bro, I don't want to really do that. Like, that doesn't sound like fun to me.
And Moses at the burning bush is having this moment where the Lord is basically instructing him to go back to the land where you got a warrant, and you're gonna
And
rescue.
rock that boat.
Yeah, rock that boat. You're
Yeah,
gonna.
that's actually very specific. Something that happened to me about a year ago. So I'm going over all this New World Order stuff in my head, freaking out about it. Long story. I think I've told a little bit of this story before.
Hold on, hold on.
Anyways,
Before you, I was almost done with my point, and then you can tell your story. So he tells him to go back to Egypt, and he's like, "Yo, bro, I don't want to go back to Egypt. First off, you don't want to use me, Lord, because I'm a stutterer. Like I stutter my words. I don't talk well." And the Lord basically tells him to shut up. That He's gonna give him the words to speak, and it's gonna be fine. So I just found it funny that this Akhenaten Moses correlation is there because Akhenaten was definitely against the grain of Egypt. Like he wasn't good with the polytheistic stance. He didn't like the priest structure they had. He did not like he didn't like some of the temple. He built new temples
Yeah.
and consecrated whole new
He
lands.
built a whole new city, exactly,
Everything,
dedicated to the
everything,
Son of God, exactly. Yeah,
everything. He changed everything, and it was honestly, if you look back at the prosperity level of Egypt at that time, it was the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. I think it was reported he had a city of gold that
yeah,
when the sun came up, it would shine like a beacon of light across the horizon. They said you could see it from almost the ends of the earth. It was this man Akhenaten worshipped God in a way that, and it disgusted the pharaohs. They
yeah.
they
And I just
hated.
really quickly want to say before you go on your story, chat, is that with Moses being the idea of Moses being Akhenaten is really interesting. Looking at the history, because a couple centuries earlier, Egypt is not that great. Yuya comes
No,
into Egypt.
no,
Yuya helps out Egypt. And so the story goes that Joseph has this dream about the drought coming, right? But regardless,
yeah,
the historical story of Yuya is that they build up dams and do nilometers, which are designed to deal with droughts, right? And that they have a huge grain storage system that they used for Egypt. Again, this is I don't know if you remember, but that's kind
right,
of a
yeah,
big part of this. And then
yeah.
yeah,
the way, but with Yuya, what happened was these different groups had to pay their taxes to get access to the grain during the drought. And if you couldn't afford it, what ended up happening was you said, okay, I'll give you my cattle, but I can't really like afford to do that. So I'll give you the labor of the cattle, like whatever is produced at the end of the season. You'll technically own them and I'll work it. And then there was a drought. It kept going for apparently something like 7 years. This is again,
7. That's a specific number.
yeah, it's pretty good, right? And then the guys are like they're like, well, we don't have anything else to give you. Well, let's have your land, but we need our land. Well, you can use the land. The Pharaoh will own the land, but you can use your land because there's a drought. Now, the thing that's interesting is the Nile being diverted for the purpose of working on the city around Giza. Sorry, around Giza, right? No, is it Gaza? No, Giza. Sorry, Giza. Building of the pyramid area. It looks like that this area is where water was diverted, and up to that point, Egypt has 3 seasons instead of 4 because
correct.
you have the flood season when Ethiopia has the winter. So when the flood season comes, they have all this land soaked with water so they can grow their food, and all of a sudden that wasn't happening because they diverted the water for the purpose of building this city. So it
Right.
destroyed, and this is also interesting because Moses's 10 commandments, there's a thing there where he says he goes up to Mount Sinai, he comes down with all the commandments and shatters them when he sees the golden calf. And what we have is not what he had a conversation with God about in the 10 commandments. And this is a major thing. If you think about the second temple period or all these people that are following some of the rules, right? The divine maxims of Ptah-hotep have the 10 commandments in them, and it's 42 rules altogether that include a lot of specific things from LDS, like talking, but they're all written differently. It's like, I have fasted, I have not lied, I have not murdered, I have
So
not. It's like a checklist.
No,
But
the first tablets actually were the Melchizedek tablets, right?
last
So then
one,
they
saying that
reject
the
the higher
laws of
law.
Moses were about
last
300 and something.
last one I want to say is the funniest one is there's a rule is I have not diverted water. That's I've not diverted water from other people. Okay.
So the laws of Moses he's talking about the laws of that Pharaoh that were derived from the laws of Moses. The laws of Moses was around, God forgive me if I have this mistaken, I'm gonna give the roundabout number because I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's around 300 to 400 plus rules. Did you hear what I said? It's 300 to 400 plus rules.
Yeah,
And
there's supposed to be
you can Google it.
613 rules, or what the Hebrews say, because there's 613
Right.
parts of the soul.
There you go, 613. So I knew I had that number wrong. Okay, but it was more. My point was,
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Like
It's more than 10.
It was impossible. It literally was impossible for them to keep this, and it's the reason why they had the animal sacrifice altar, so that they could repent for these laws that they've broken.
Which really sucks, right? For like imagine you're a sheep, you know what I mean? And then like someone's like, "I'm sorry, there's 613 rules. I gotta kill you. Like I don't know what to do."
Imagine and could you
Sorry, I coveted my neighbor's wife's sheep.
It's like really unfair, real. Like, okay, you think this is God's nature? I'm just saying, there's something flawed about the way the second temple.
It's funny. We don't have any reports of them running out of animals.
But we do have a lot of extinctions, so there might have been like some better, like a unicorn sacrifice might have gotten away with.
That's where the dinosaurs went to the law of Moses.
I knew that was gonna come back and bite us. We were talking about dinosaurs, unicorns in the last one. Oh my lamb. All right, so God kept the blessings going, right? He gave them grain, he gave them water when they needed it, he gave them shelter, he gave, like, the animals reproduced in a way to where they would not run out of these sacrifices during their sojourn in the wilderness. Like, there is, when you're talking about the miracles of God, and I love the atheists, bless their heart, they read this stuff and to them it doesn't make carnal sense. It's because you're not dealing with an extremely carnal being. You know, you're dealing with the creator, and so he can do what he wants to do. And the children of Israel wandering around is kind of like us wandering around before we find the truth. Like we're aimless, and we erect these golden calves of money or whatever, and we just don't have the truth. And then when we find the truth, we're like, oh, it was that simple? Yeah, that simple.
Kind of interesting, like Slavoj Zizek, who's the communist atheist that fought against Christianity and Jordan Peterson debate and all that. He's a new book coming
I have
out.
something interesting you can pull up that I posted on my Instagram the other day.
That's what just for the quick, I want to say, like, the Christian atheism book is interesting that this exists because they're admitting that essentially the entire system is a continuation of that practice. So it comes back to the Second Temple thing of like, what are we calling Christianity, or what are we calling that, like, social secular civility? But yeah, sorry, Latter-day Chat, keep going.
Yeah, so when talking about a different gospel, so this is an older painting from about the 4th century. I posted it on my Instagram yesterday, I believe. You pull that up. It should be the one of Melchizedek. No, not that. People tagged me in a bunch of things down. More. That one on the left.
So
So this is from a cathedral from the 4th century in Italy, I believe.
Wait, what did you say? What did you say, Celestial?
I said I do have to leave. I have to step out for a second. I love you guys. Thank you so much for having me. For all of my fans out there, thank you much.
Dude, well, let me really quickly send everybody to the Moroni League if you want, or do you want me to show that? For anybody who's like in the thoughtful faith or like members, you can check out the Moroni League, which is a super chill. Oop, now I'm in the radio chat. That was my bad. But if you go check this out, there's even like Latin and Spanish now. Pretty sweet. So check out the Moroni League. You can get a link through Celestial and I, also through Chad. And yeah, thanks, man. This is awesome so far, and we'll talk again soon, hopefully.
Thank you, guys. See you later.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Right. So what was right? The Melchizedek thing. So if you could pull up that painting that I posted, mosaic.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, this is really
very similar mosaic on the cover of Margaret Barker's Temple Theology.
So we talked about this a minute earlier, but just so people get this idea, like, this is a hand reaching through the veil, right?
Yeah, that's the hand of God. And like if you can read the comments,
they're almost at a sacrifice right here.
Yeah, so I actually pinned the comment from Ether with the hand of God through the veil. So that should be pinned there if you want to read that. I'd rather not read it because it still
Which
hurts a little bit.
Where do you want me to read it?
For
Sorry.
goodness sake.
Where?
In the
Oh, here.
comments.
Right here. Okay.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, I want to say it's interesting looking at this picture because the Melchizedek priesthood, again, the idea of the right of taxation. So it's not so much that you're supposed to slaughter your goat, but it's like people were offering up to the temple system, which is like the state, right? So this is an excuse of, no one can take taxes except for the Melchizedek. So people are all presiding and presenting to Melchizedek. Okay, here's from the Book of Ether, which again, there's a book called the Book of Ether. How cool is that? And it came to pass that when the brother of Jared said these words, behold, the Lord stretched forth his hand and touched the stone one by one with its finger, and the veil was taken from off the eyes of the brother of Jared. And he saw the finger of the Lord, and it was the finger of a man, like unto flesh and blood. And the brother of Jared fell down before the Lord, for he was struck with fear. And the Lord saw that the brother of Jared had fallen to the earth. And the Lord said unto him, arise, why hast thou fallen? And he saith unto the Lord, I saw the finger of the Lord, and I feared lest he should smite me, for I knew not that the Lord had flesh and blood. And the Lord said unto him, because of thy faith, thou hast seen that I shall take upon me flesh and blood, and never has man come before me with such exceeding faith as thou hast. For were it not so, ye could not have seen my finger. Sawest thou more than this? Sawest thou more than this? And he answered, nay, Lord, show thyself unto me. And the Lord said unto him, believest thou the words that I speak? And he answered, yea, Lord, I know that thou speakest the truth, for thou art a God of truth, and canst not lie. And when he had said the words, behold, the Lord showed himself unto him and said, because thou knowest those things, ye are redeemed from the fall. Therefore ye are brought back into my presence. Therefore I show myself unto you.
Right. So for those who aren't aware, this passage right here and that artwork is very temple imagery. It's very symbolic, especially if you look at the compasses and the squares all over that image as well. So seeing the hand of God is symbolic of passing through the veil. Like the first thing you see, you pass through the veil and you enter into the presence of God. And seeing the hand of God is a significant thing, as noted in that passage, because it's like God isn't just this weird disembodied energy thing. The form of God is the form like unto a man, that man is created in the image and likeness of God. And it is that acknowledgement that allows the brother of Jared to enter into his presence, where first he sees a little bit of God, and then he sees the fullness of God, and he sees Jehovah, the premortal Jesus Christ, right? So it's very interesting that you see in old mosaics and stuff that same imagery of the veil and the hand. It's very, very much temple symbolism. So that's why that's very interesting to put in there.
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think the deal is with the hand through the veil? Like, why does there need to be a veil? Like, what's that? What do you think the deal is?
Well, I've spoken to people. There's a lot of reasons why there's a veil. Obviously, with the restored gospel, we understand the plan of salvation. We understand why we are here. We understand the pre-existence and stuff. But also, there's people that I've talked to that say, okay, if Jesus Christ himself came down from heaven and told you that the Mormon church is true, would you believe him? And there's some people that'll say, yeah, of course. Other people who have said, no, absolutely not. I wouldn't join, even if God himself came down from heaven and told me. God judges people according to the light which they receive. And there's a lot of things that aren't widely talked about, but in the church, we do believe that Jesus Christ still talks to people. We believe that angels still visit people. And I can bear witness of those things, that they are true. And that I've spoken to multiple people on multiple occasions about those things that can confirm those things. That still happens. But God judges people according to the light and knowledge that they receive. So if God were to prove his existence to somebody who is so attached to their worldly desires, their biases, and their pride, that they would reject him anyways, he would have to damn them to have no forgiveness in this life nor the next, much like the Pharisees who committed blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, that they will never get that forgiveness because they knew exactly what they were doing. They had a full knowledge. They saw Jesus Christ fulfilling prophecies of the Messiah, doing miracles, and they still denied him, right? So why does God not, why is there this veil that you get portions of light, beams of light of truth from God at a time? Because not everyone can handle the whole truth. But to those that earnestly seek with an open heart, they will receive signs from God. I know that I would not be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ if I did not truly believe it was true, because I think the Mormon culture is just sort of embarrassing and cringe, and I kind of hate it. The only thing I hate more than the Utah Mormons are the Utah ex-Mormons, because they're just psychotic. But my whole life, I just thought the Mormon culture was annoying, embarrassing, and I've never gotten more hate than since I've just openly believed this stuff. But so I wouldn't if I didn't truly believe it. However, looking back, it's been conspiracy theories that have led me here, and personal revelations, dreams that come true, visions, and I can now identify many of the dreams I've had as being very specific temple imagery that were of things that I did not previously know about, which is very interesting because it just corresponds so well. Like literally when I'm 16 years old, seeing a gateway, a giant doorway, gateway in the heavens that only a man and woman can enter through together. And then on the other side of it are these celestial beings made of stars. And I see them, and I see a great one that I fundamentally understand that is God, or that's the universe or something. And I see the image of that same thing within me, and it's my spirit, and I'm made in the image of God, all this crazy stuff. I mean, that's just sort of a summary of it. But now I understand, oh, that's the temple. To reach that exaltation, you need a man and woman sealed together. That's why it takes a man and woman to enter through that gate. That's why there were certain people in my dream who, much like in Lehi's dream, were too embarrassed to go through that gateway. And I'm 16 years old having these dreams. It's crazy stuff.
It's interesting thinking about also like the tabernacle looked at, like in the Zohar, it's talked about like the veil as like the bride veil. And so the church itself, before they're using a temple, they're using the tabernacle tent as sort of the veil, which is holding the truth of God in some sort of a way, so that there's like a corporeal presence, and then it's filled with the members. So it's like the body of the church, the body of Christ or whatever, is actually the membership, and everyone sharing food is kept alive. And these are some of like the earliest concepts that are tied to, Judaism, even before modern Christianity. So when you see that that's so similar to what Jesus is doing right before he dies, like, this is like the most important thing to me, guys. Let's sit together and have a meal because it's going to be a rough week. And then you look at all these different Christian groups in the future. Like, again, we talked about the hidden Christians in Japan and how they ate, rice with sake to do the Eucharist prayer. Like when they were being murdered and they couldn't admit that they were Christian and they're keeping it for centuries quietly, they were still doing the Eucharist, right? Like the last part of it that survived, which kind of shows you like how important it is to the nature of things, to God, right? Like this idea that the thing that's held together is the communal Christ consciousness,
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting because, like, in the book I was just talking about, it does talk about the biblical and extra biblical evidence that within the temple there was a ceremony that involved partaking of bread and wine, which represented the Lord, right? With this, what the peace offering is what it would be called, but the more translated version in English would be more like the peaceful ones or something like that. It's very interesting. It goes a lot into how all this stuff in Scripture is representative of temple rites. How the Sermon on the Mount is a temple ascent, and then you have the Mount of Transfiguration after that. And if you understand that, the Sermon on the Mount is ascending through 3 different layers, and then the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus transfigures, shows his true form to the apostles, and then they hear the voice of the Father. It's like, that's temple imagery.
So What do you think about the Akhenaten then aspect of temples, right? Because Akhenaten was going to build a new city, to build a new temple. They get lost for 40 years in the desert, right? This idea, instead of getting lost for 40 years in the desert, it's that they've left Cairo for 40 years trying to build their new city. And in the process have to lose some of their Egyptianness, right? Because Moses cannot enter the Holy Land because he's even still attached to the old ways.
Well, I do know from what Joseph Smith wrote on it, when they are lost in the wilderness, that was them rejecting the Melchizedek priesthood. So when Moses comes down the mountain with those first tablets that he breaks,
Yeah.
that was the higher law. That was the celestial law. That was the Melchizedek priesthood. They then take this golden calf, which they say, that's the God that saved us from Israel. So it's an idol of Jehovah, which makes sense when you realize that Jehovah or Yahweh was the son of El Elyon, the Most High God, who was depicted as a bull, right? So they were worshiping this calf, which is the son of a bull. They're worshiping Jehovah, which is the son of El Elyon, but worshiping this false idol, putting their own ideas of God onto it rather than worshiping God for who he is. And more quite literally, Moses is inviting them to go up on the mountain with him to see the face of God, to communicate with God directly. And they reject that higher law for this lower law and form Jehovah into what they want him to be, instead of going up on the mountain with Moses and seeing Jehovah themselves. Right? And this corresponds to the Deuteronomists with their literature saying, oh, well, when you went on the mountain, you know how you said you saw God face to face? Actually, you only heard a voice and saw no image, right? So it sort of devolves into that state even more with the Deuteronomists. But you have that idea of them rejecting the presence of God for a lesser law.
What do you think about the law in terms of the lesser law? Like, what is the difference really?
Well, the book of Hebrews, it talks about how, the higher priesthood is the Melchizedek priesthood, the priesthood after the order of Melchizedek. It says that when Aaron was still in the loins of his father Abraham, which is more metaphorical because that's a lot of generations away, Abraham was paying his tithing till Melchizedek. That Melchizedek's priesthood is greater than Aaron's priesthood. We know through the restored gospel, which we are the only religion who actually even talks about the Aaronic and Melchizedek priesthood, right? That the Aaronic priesthood is essentially a portion of the Melchizedek priesthood. It is a lesser form of it, a preparatory gospel, if you will, right? So the Aaronic priesthood, the priesthood of Aaron, is a lesser priesthood for those who are not ready. The keys to the Melchizedek priesthood contain the mysteries of God, as Paul would have it. That's why, so a lot of people that we know are in sort of like remnant movements where they believe, oh, the church is in partial apostasy or they only have the Aaronic law. My opinion on the matter is that the keys will never be taken from the earth again, right? But it is your choice to use the keys, right? So just because you are given the keys to the Melchizedek priesthood, you're given the keys to the mysteries of God, does not mean that if you don't seek after those mysteries of God, you will have them. Which you see a lot of times with Utah culture. If I'm telling some random person from Utah, oh yeah, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because I literally had a vision and spoke to an angel who told me things in the future before they happened and revealed to me truths, and I know that it's true because of that, they'll be like, you're a heretic, you're an apostate or something. It's like, no, I'm saying this angel told me that the church is true and that we have modern prophets, right?
I was
And
going to
because
say
whether they know it or
I was going to say to Ronan really quickly because they associated the Demole with the Aaronic priesthood. I wouldn't do that personally, but I can see how that's happened because the church uses the Aaronic priesthood as like a youth group, and so more Masons use Demole as a youth group. So you could say, okay, well, there's a similarity in youth groups, but Aaronic priesthood's not a youth group. You know what I mean? Like your Aaronic priesthood is a priesthood. It just happens to be that today 13-year-olds are considered kids, but it's always been that in ancient Judaism, like at 13, that's how it went.
Yeah, it's also, I know Joseph Smith and Brigham Young have spoken on this, that when Israel is gathered and when we bring the Jews from the two witnesses into the fold, they will be the ones to administer to the Aaronic duties, because they naturally have it. What our Aaronic priests actually have is a lesser Melchizedek priesthood. The Aaronic priesthood is inherited through bloodline, through the Levites. So when they are brought into the fold at a large enough number, they will be the ones to administer to the Aaronic duties, and the Gentiles will administer to the Melchizedek duties. So now it's just sort of like, generally speaking, the younger priesthood holders end up on the Aaronic duties, right? Like, just sort of hierarchy.
Have you looked into the Zohar much? I mentioned that earlier. The Jewish Zohar is like a mystical book from the 2nd century that has, I've noticed, like a lot of similarities. I was asking ChatGPT like just to list some of the things about it, but like the mystical interpretations of scripture, similar cosmology and reports of spiritual realms, salvation, redemption. It seems like the Zohar is kind of, it upsets the Second Temple Judaism, and there's still like a trend in Judaism of believing in the mystical, like original path, even though it's kind of kept suppressed because it doesn't jive with the status quo. But what do you think about that everyone's trying to keep alive that, original tradition too?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with it, but I'm pretty sure where I've heard of it is from Margaret Barker when she's talking about the long exiled Jews who continued the old religion of the Father and the Son and the mysticism, right? So like you talk about preaching a different gospel, we have scholars literally saying the original Christians were temple mystics, and I quote, who would go to the temple to have visions of God and his Son and would do theosis rituals to become sons of God, and they believed that Jehovah was the Son of God, and they believed in the Melchizedek priesthood and all this stuff. It's like, I wonder what that sounds like, and the religion focused on entering into the presence of the tree of life.
Yeah,
enter in the presence of God. Like,
that's the thing. The Zohar is all about the tree of life. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there. So I wonder about go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I have heard of it. I believe it was in the Temple Theology book by Margaret Barker, or maybe it was in Plain and Precious Things. I can't show the Temple Theology book because I'm letting someone borrow it right now. But it does sound familiar, and I think that could definitely be considered some of the quote-unquote visionary men's work, right? Like, that's what we're calling those people now, the people who believe that they can communicate directly with God, that they can receive visions and revelation from God, that God is a personal being, which is why I think the seeing the hand of God thing is so significant. Because this higher cosmic omnipotent being is like us, and that's not to bring God down to our level, it's to say what our potential inside of our souls is,
I mean, so exactly. The Zohar means splendor, and you're talking about that tree of life idea, like the Jewish tree of life, the Sephirot kind of idea that that we see. Splendor, radiance, foundational work of Cabalistic literature. Group of books included commentary, mystical aspects of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and scriptural interpretations, as well as material on mysticism, mythical cosmology, and mystical psychology. It discusses the nature of God, the origin and structure of the universe, the nature of souls, redemption, the relationship of ego to darkness, and true self to the light of God, right? It's supposed to have been published in the 12th, 13th century, and claims it was a Tanaic work recorded in the, post First Temple period, right? Occupation of the Roman Empire. So, actually.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I'll have to read up on that more. There's definitely a lot of Kabbalah roots into First Temple Judaism,
right?
Where there's a guy I know that he was actually talking about how he started reading the Book of Mormon because he was like, somehow Joseph Smith literally recreated First Temple Kabbalah mysticism, and that's not coming from like Margaret Barker, but from like this Kabbalah expert. Like, yeah, Joseph Smith, without any knowledge of it, basically recreated this ancient Jewish mysticism in his religion and theology. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Keep going.
I don't know. All right. So do you remember me saying that story of that dream I had where I saw that Glenn Beck video and the one pinned, and I prayed and asked to know who it was, and then and I only find this out a year later, but an apostle who had passed away appears in my dream and shows me all this stuff, yada yada. And I find out about a year later, the person who appeared the night after I asked God to reveal that to me was in fact the same person he spoke to. Earlier when I was thinking about this stuff, about, an angel of light being how priests are presented in the temple, I remember that in that dream, the clothing he was wearing is very similar to the clothing you would see in the temple. He was wearing, from what I remember, pure white clothing, like a suit almost, with a white suit and a white tie and white shoes, like what you would wear in the temple. So when you enter into the temple in those clothing, you're considered an angel, a messenger. I think it's significant for someone to appear like that in a dream to me. That's coincidentally the answer to the question I asked,
People often associate like the masonry aspect, but I think it's interesting just the idea of like traditions that are keeping similar historical traditions. So you can, again, like talk about the Zohar, talking about the Kabbalah, talking about, ancient Judaism in connection to the First Temple, but also in terms of the idea of the checkered floor, or this idea of dynamic and between the two pillars, right? Because there is this idea of a veil, right? Even this idea of like the world and space on top of the two pillars, and that we're able to pass between the celestial plane and the material plane. And that idea of messengers is really interesting because people are often, I just had this idea, like, I don't know, I see writers often, with artists, they're like, I just channeled it, like so much of, the art movement, like I just channeled this song, so Stairway to Heaven, I think those kinds of things. So people are aware that there's something, that there's kind of like that veil idea, but they're not sure how to like interact with the veil. And we've been really trained to ignore it, or to, it used to be that people everywhere, when I go to Eastern Europe, people throw holy water in the angles of their houses because they're afraid that's where like demons and spirits like gather. Like there's still a logic around the world that assumes that these things are happening. It seems more in America, in Northern Europe and stuff, that they've kind of forgot, like through atheism, forgotten that there's anything around us that we're interacting with.
Yeah. Do you want to read some super chats real quick before we go to another thought?
I'll do it. Most of the super chats are Box Saga. I could listen to Box Saga. You know what I'll do? I got a Pop Saga. Hold on. I'll show you Bach. Ior Bach was a tour guide in Sweden who liked to sit naked and dig umbara. He believed that the world was created by like the love between a man and a goat. He's a death metal hero for the death metal people out there. But his mythological eccentric beliefs around his fortress of Suomolina, I don't know, it's pretty interesting. I get why people keep wanting to bring up the Bach Saga. Okay, other comments. Stefan says, talk about circumcision. Jesus is a petty distraction from spreading warnings against parturition. Oh my gosh, Stefan, I read that differently earlier. Which is a mortal sin, IMHO. Okay, so when you wrote this, I thought you were saying that parturition was a mortal sin, which is hilarious to me because that's childbirth. So if you were saying that, like, yeah, the Mormons are in trouble if childbirth's a bad thing. If you're against childbirth, you're not going to like the Mormons. I don't know what to tell you. But no, your point being that people that are warning, like, so you're saying antinatalists, people that are against childbirth, you're saying that antinatalists, that's kind of a mortal sin, which technically speaking makes sense. Like if you're against life, that seems kind of like it could be a mortal sin. If you're perpetuating, it's like time travel murder. You're like, I want to stop people from being born, and you're working to keep people from having kids. Eugenics and sterilization campaigns. Yeah, that sounds like a moral sin. I joined the LDS if they promoted pre-planned C-sections. Will the LDS ever do that? Maybe if we get like a female OBGYN in charge. I don't know if that's the thing. I'm not. The jury's still out.
Like that's not really something that like the doctrine of the church touches on. Like talking about Jesus and like I don't know where C-sections would come up. I mean, like I have like family members.
The jury's still out on whether or not the jury's still out on whether or not like universal anything is the method. And I mean that for so many things. Like there are very few things that you can say are universal. They're not in a material form. There's very few material actions that you can say are universal. And this is the problem when people are like, oh, everyone has to respect the Sabbath. Okay, that's a good rule. Okay, but how are you going to do that? Well, no one's allowed to use their microwave or touch buttons. And if you step on grass, you're going to jail. This is the thing. Like, you don't want to do the material thing. You want to figure out how to actually find the intention of the rule. So if the rule there you're trying to make is that everyone should have help having babies, yeah, I'm for that. I think the amount of help going into having people not have babies is disproportionate. I think, if you're thinking about it, it's people are saying, wow, it's so hard to have a kid. I should choose not to have a kid. And we've made it so you can have a choice to not have a kid. You can murder or you can not, whatever you call that. It's still a choice. It'd be a lot easier to say, how about you can have a kid and the state will pay for the kid? If you don't want to do that, you don't have to, but the state would make it possible. And the reason that would be is that in 20 years, your kid will be a taxpayer. If we educate your kid, likely we'll be making more money as a state off. It's a beneficial relationship for you to have kids. There's plenty of reasons why it would work to facilitate helping people have kids. I agree with that logic. You look at Finland and Iceland and places like that, and they're not just making sure that people have kids, they're making sure they have quality educations because their children are like the resource of the state. And if you refine that resource, you have a stronger state. So I don't see a problem with that at all. I think, the difference being then they're going to say, oh, we really want kids to be this way, and so that's why we end up with the circumstances where people are being, I think the gross disproportionate issues with abortion are also like, you can see like, where are people being aborted? Like how many people are being aborted in which populations and which communities? How many people are being sterilized at which ages in South America? And it starts to be really scary because it looks like a major sterilization campaign, right?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that's what it is. I believe it's satanic and that there are premortal, pre-existent spirits who exist. They're waiting to come down here, and that Satan wants to stop that.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting topic. You want to talk about Messiah ben Joseph?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, for those who don't know, in Jewish traditions, they believe in someone who will be a precursor to the main Messiah, Messiah ben David, or the Davidic king, that will come before his rule, so before the second coming of Jesus Christ. He will be from the bloodline of Joseph of Egypt. He's oftentimes associated with the Ezekiel 37 prophecy of the stick of Joseph and stick of Judah, where they will ride on one stick for Joseph and one stick of Judah, and they will use that to gather Israel. We identify that as prophesying the writings of Judah and Joseph coming together, the Book of Mormon, the Bible, right? So he will be a precursor, a prophet, before the coming of the Messiah. He will rebuild the temple. He will be associated with stones like the Urim and Thummim that the ancient priests would have, and he will be killed against the enemies of God, fighting them, which sounds very familiar because the Book of Mormon, when prophesying of Joseph Smith, says his name will be Joseph, like after his father. He will be from the bloodline of Joseph of Egypt, and he will bring forth the record of the stick of Ephraim, the stick of Joseph, which is the Book of Mormon, right? Very interesting connections there. So yeah, I wonder if anyone has anything interesting in the chat to say about that, about Messiah ben Joseph.
Also, some thoughts on the stick too, because one thing we talk about the stick of Joseph being like the staff of Moses, but there's more there. Also, the idea of writing on papyrus, so you'd have sticks that were folded like flat,
like scrolls on sticks.
Exactly. So it's like data, right?
You want to know what's crazier? So one experience when I was like trying to figure out what I believe. So I was reading the Bible. I had not a Mormon Bible, but like a normal King James Bible without any of the Mormon references in it. Before anyone gets confused, just from Walmart. So, and I was already aware of some stuff with the Book of Mormon. I knew the background. I'd family members who are LDS. And I was aware that it was supposed to be about the tribe of Joseph. So I'm reading through the Bible in Genesis, and Jacob is blessing his offspring. And I read a passage that talks about how a portion of Joseph's seed will remain like the portion of his coat that remained. And I make note of that. And I remember the page it was on, make note of this in my head, it stands out loud. I was like, hey, either this is good evidence for the Book of Mormon, or maybe Joseph Smith copied this for the idea of the Book of Mormon, but it sounds like the Book of Mormon. Right, so this event stands out a lot of me. I make note of it. I remember the page. Later, I'm skimming through the Book of Mormon, reading different passages, trying to find stuff about secret combinations in there, because that's my main interest in looking into it. And I find that same passage word for word. I'm like, oh, did Joseph Smith literally just plagiarize this from the Bible? Right? Because it's word for word. A portion of your lineage will remain like the portion of your coat. So I go back to that same exact page in Genesis, when Jacob is blessing his offspring. In the same exact Bible, the giant King James Bible with a cross on it from Walmart. However, when I read through it again, that passage is not in the Bible. But I read it. I very clearly saw it. And then I found it in the Book of Mormon. That was a vision, very clearly. God, because I was someone who was earnestly seeking the truth, God showed me that prophecy of the Book of Mormon in the Bible, even though it was not actually written in the Bible. Though there are other prophecies in the Bible prophesies multiple times that the tribe of Joseph will get their own promised land. The Bible promises that Joseph will be a fruitful vine who goes over the wall. Right? That is a reference to Lehi, leaving Jerusalem. And then famously, there is the stick of Joseph and the stick of Ephraim. I mean, the stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah, where to gather Israel, Messiah ben Joseph will gather the stick of Joseph in the hand of Ephraim with the stick of Judah, and they will become one. Because the Book of Mormon is a true record.
It's also interesting
Rad Data 4. Rad Data 4 says that he had a very similar experience. I'd like you to put that in the chat. I'm very interested in hearing that.
Yeah, Chad.
Genuinely.
Let us know that. I was going to just really quickly add that the Kakuri Krishitans, which we talked about earlier, the idea that Japanese Christians were like half of Japan was Christian, more than a third of Japan was killed for being Christian, and it's kind of erased from history. Although the Japanese seem to be making more and more movies and stories about it. But one of the things when they found like one of the families in like 2008, when this documentary interview thing going to the Northeast Islands that I saw, and they found, they still practice the Eucharist. They'd almost forgotten why, but they had a piece of the fabric of the priest who was able to perform the Eucharist, because not everyone was able to perform the Eucharist, properly. You have to be a priest to do it. So also interesting to me, and just the fact that like the patterns, the idea of like the cloak and patterns idea.
Yeah, a garment with something sewn into it.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because, so in the Apocrypha, I think it might be in the Book of Jubilee, maybe, in the creation account, when Adam and Eve are cast out of the garden, they have an animal, the first animal that's killed by Jehovah to cover them. So they are given a garment of skins to cover them. This symbolizes the atonement, as noted by many people. So you have Jehovah, who is Jesus Christ, the God of Israel, covering them with this garment of skins. Now, legend has it that that same garment was passed down from generation to generation until it got to Jacob, or Israel, which he gave to his favorite son, Joseph. Now, modern Bibles will translate his coat as a coat of many colors, but it's more accurately translated as a coat of many markings. So it wasn't like some rainbow coat. It was a coat with priesthood patterns sewn into it, which may have been the coat passed down from Adam and Eve.
Yeah, we definitely got to get David to talk at some point with the LDS about the Tree of Life idea more, because like the more we look at the Sephiroth idea, this idea of the Tree of Life being a connection of concepts of family, of your full body, your full mind, right? I think that definitely, this is interesting because then you've got Christian Jewish yoga, essentially, because the idea of becoming a full manifested person, right?
Well, actually, can you look up real quick? Tree of Life, Jesus Christ, 12 Apostles on Google. There's a specific image I'm looking for.
Okay, let me see what I can find.
Jesus will be sitting in the middle of the Tree of Life like a throne. Yes. And the 12 apostles will be around him. Now, the earliest depictions of the Kabbalah Tree of Life had actually 12 individuals on the outside, right? We see on that version God the Father above, sending this seed, his son, down to the Tree of Life. And then you see 12 others descending from the Tree of Life also. In 1 Nephi chapter 11 and 12, it's very clear that the Tree of Life, now that we understand the historical context, the religion of the visionary men, the Tree of Life is the mother of Jesus Christ, and it symbolizes both Mary and the heavenly mother, right? So Jesus is shown, not Jesus, Nephi is shown the Virgin Mary and told, this is the mother of the Son of God after the manner of the flesh. Now do you know the understanding of the tree which is fair and white and beautiful, described the same way as the mother, when historically the Tree of Life is the divine feminine? Then in the next chapter, we see Christ descending out of heaven, and 12 others descending after him. Now this Tree of Life is both the divine mother and the condescension of Christ. So you see Christ condescending out of heaven, and we know in the religion of the visionary men that the high priests in the temples consider themselves to be divine sons of God, the sons of God which Job says were there at the foundation of the earth. And then, just as Jesus Christ descends down from the divine mother, from the Tree of Life, there are 12 others that descend down after him. Now, considering that the original Kabbalah had 12 beings on the outside, and then you see Christ representing the middle of the tree, and that all of them were considered emanations of the One, of the Father, God, that Yahweh was the prime emanation of God the Father, but all the angels were also considered emanations of the One, of the universal consciousness of God. Very interesting symbolism you see right there, especially in regards to the Book of Mormon.
There's also, I looked it up and someone had already written this at some point. In Mormon Kabbalah, there are 12 Sephirot, which I was like, oh, that's cool. I wish they taught us about Mormon Kabbalah in Mormon Sunday school. That'd be sweet. But 10 visible on the Tree of Life, 1 invisible, and the 12 Sephirot is the tree itself, right? Which, think about that, and because you have the idea of the 10 Sephirot. Let me show you again the Sephirot. The Sephirot, which this is described too. Like that's why I want to ask David about this concept, because the Sephirot's often presented as 3 and 3, but then there's the above and below, and so it ends up being 10. But if you think about it, the idea of the invisible is really important to the Zohar and to Judaism and even to Mormonism and Christianity, because it's the feminine. You got the idea of the Pistis Sophia. I think in the chat at one point we recently talked about Leonard Nimoy and his Jewish book that he did, and how he talks about like the feminine hand symbol, right? Sign, the Vulcan salute. Let me see, the priestly blessing from the Jewish Kohanim with both hands, because when women basically in the Jewish temple, they say, okay, every man close your eyes. The men cover their eyes, and then the women put up this symbol which represents like the feminine aspect of God, right? So it's the hidden symbol. You're not supposed to think about it, look at it. It's the wife of God. You don't talk about my wife. That's kind of the keep
and
your
it's very interesting
wife's name out of your mouth.
Because in regards to, that reminds me of something David Butler was saying on the Ward Radio live stream the other day. So he talks about how one of the possible reasons that there's the name Mary for so many women in the New Testament is because it's not a name, it's a title.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes in and talks about how Moses' sister Miriam, that's the source of the name Mary, she was considered a prophetess, almost a feminine counterpart to Moses when it comes to authority. And that there's this idea of a priesthood of Mary that was passed down. So Mary, the mother of Christ, was of this priesthood. That's why she's called Mary. It was a title, Just like how the title of Melchizedek, even though his name's not literally Melchizedek, is given to Jesus Christ, because it's the same order, right? And then the idea that Mary Magdalene is also a priestess of this order, that she is the one who anointed Jesus Christ with oil, right? Because you see Jesus Christ in the New Testament being anointed with oil, and then a couple chapters later, and many women joined them, and one of them was Mary Magdalene. Magdalene can also be translated to mean of the tower, or possibly of the temple. So Mary Magdalene could be translated to Mary of the temple. So when you talk about a sort of feminine priesthood order, right? And you have hand signs, right? That's another interesting thing, that like
Yeah,
hand
totally.
signs that you're not supposed to talk about. It's very interesting.
We should check out also, I'm kind of interested now to look at some of this Mormon Kabbalah. I never saw this before. So, but we should read through this because I think not a lot of people have thought about what the Sephirot represents, like these symbols and everything. And from this perspective might be interesting. For those who are familiar, great. But those who aren't, this is the tree of life in the Sephirot idea that you kind of are connecting the Kabbalah to mysticism, like a super ancient idea. Hindus also have a very similar idea. So you've got the idea. Let me go like back and forth here. So like at the top of it is the crown, right? Keter is the top of the Sephirot. And it's the topmost where we must begin with God, where we end in God's presence. And then below, because you have to imagine like there's a path that goes on. There's knowledge. So you go down to knowledge, which is Banah. And then from knowledge, knowledge comes at a price. We put the false gods of pride and ego behind us. And we have to recognize that knowledge isn't enough. That's just data. So then there's Chokmah, which is wisdom. So wisdom is up here. So this is like the top of the crown. And then you can traverse from there. So usually it's like through mercy or through beauty. Like some people go directly to beauty, but if you go through apparently the LDS path, like follow mercy, and from mercy to judgment. Where's judgment again? Is it Vic? Is they're calling Nick Gavina? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Strength, judgment, strength. So from mercy to Gavina over here, and then to compassion. So from judgment to compassion, and from compassion to endurance or victory, which I think again like interesting difference in description. I think like the idea of endurance is interesting. We are tested and we endure. Victory is an interesting different term for that. And then from endurance to submission. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
In the chat, Lucy Rose Up says, I'm not exactly sure what that means in detail, that the image of the tree with the apostles was new to me, yada yada. You can read that. So basically what I was trying to say there is we know the tree of life, both in the historical context of when the Book of Mormon took place and in the Book of Mormon, refers to the divine mother, the feminine God, if you will, the feminine aspect of God or the feminine counterpart of God, however you want to view it. The tree of life is always that, right? Proverbs 3 says, in regards to the feminine aspect of God that was mostly edited out of the Bible, she is a tree of life, right? But anyways, so what I'm saying is that
which explains the invisible Sephirot, God and the invisible Sephirot, right?
Yeah. So in the tree of life, it represents the condescension, entering into the presence of the tree of life within the temple, the Holy of Holies. And we should also make note that the tree of life in the temple was the original menorah, right? So the menorah, the tree, and the mother are the same symbol in this ancient religion. So entering into the presence of the tree of life is entering into the presence of God. So with this symbol of Christ being the largest branch on this tree and 12 others above them, it is Christ and the 12 others being divine beings who are condescending out of heaven from the same heavenly mother, right? That they have the same mother and they are condescending into this world from the presence of God into our fallen mortal world, right? Christ being Jehovah, the God of Israel, who is given all authority in heaven and earth by El Elyon or Elohim, the Father, but the 12 disciples being angelic beings subordinate to the Son who are also incarnated in the flesh, right? So that depiction there in 1 Nephi 11 through 12, as well as in this art which corresponds to it a lot, is showing that they are all divine beings born of the same heavenly mother.
What do you think about the 10 versus 12 again, like just this idea of the invisible, right? Like, so people are studying the Sephirot with only 10. Like, what do you think that it would do in like a post like Second Temple idea to remove the feminine and this? Like, so what's the other part? It's like it's the feminine and the tree itself, or it's like the feminine and the self, or the feminine and God. Like, what are the two parts you think that are missing then? In like the
Honestly,
modern secular
that
way?
could be it very much, because we do know that the tree of life is the mother. So it could be, when you say the self and the feminine, the self being the fact that while God is this transcendent being, God is
Yeah,
also
because our
similar
self
to
is his self.
us.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
exactly. It goes in line with why seeing the hand of God is significant, because many people like watching this, they're not going to really understand how significant that is. It's like, for you to perceive God and enter into the presence, the first step is to realize God has a hand like us. And then the brother of Jared sees the hand of God through the veil and is able to enter into the presence of God by acknowledging that and understanding that we are the same type of being as God, and that we can be one with God in the same way Christ is one with God. As Christ prays in the scriptures, he prays that they will all be one in the same way you and I are one. That's what he says. I forget the exact verse of that, but very interesting.
This went a little too many Sephirots, but I was just trying to see if we could do a 10 Sephiroth, what that will look like. But that's an interesting idea that we have to work on. Is this will work, right?
No one in human history has ever seen God. Everyone who ever met Jesus Christ, Joseph Smith's seen God. I personally know people that have seen God. They've
Yeah.
gone to the temple and
What do
received
you think about
visions.
that? So that's an interesting thought too, because
Yeah, like I
I've talked
literally
to
personally know people who have
yeah,
received what's known as the second comforter. So
I've talked to people that say, they're like, well, God is this like light source that will destroy you to be in the presence of, and other people talk about you could be made more than human, essentially, like made to withstand. God can do anything. You be made to withstand the presence of God. But then also this idea of like material form, right? Like, so what do you think about this idea of God looking in like man and Jesus shaking hands and like this material aspect of things? Why is that essential? Why, what do you think about that?
well, I think that all spirits are sort of transcendent. I think that spirit as a substance has the ability to command the intelligence of matter, right? That there's this fundamental spiritual substance to matter, and that through willpower, spirit intelligence or consciousness can command it, right? So God being the highest level of that, but he also has a form that he is embodied in, not necessarily constrained to, right? So he has a physical form, and that by being embodied in physical matter, that intelligence can command reality. That's my interpretation of it. However, we are made in the image of God. It's important to understand one important thing is that God is not just some disembodied energy, God is a heavenly Father. He is a personage, and he wants us to be a part of his family. And in order to do that, we have to elevate and go up to his level on a higher level of reality. But that is one of the main things to understand is that God has a family, God has a wife, God has a son, and God wants us to return back and be part of his family.
Yeah, interesting looking at some of the chats. I mean, the idea that what would you say if, so some people are like, this is the only life, right? Like you're gonna just you're just like an anomaly of sentience, and it'll transpire. What do you think about all that?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure it's a coincidence when I'm shown visions of the future by angels that come true, and when I have a vision from a passage of the Book of Mormon that I've never read that's in the Bible. I'm sure that was just my brain coincidentally getting things right. Like, there's no meaning to anything. Here's the truth. A lot of times when people say there's no meaning to anything, it's because it makes their life easier. Because if this is all there is, it doesn't matter what you do. There's no consequences. Just do what you want. But there is more to this, right? Like, there's literally so much evidence on the CIA website. They have all the Gateway Project that talks about higher dimensions and higher consciousness and God, and they scientifically prove that there is something that is above us that they can't quite explain, right?
Well, they probably
And when
could, but
people,
it's classified. You see, you're not allowed to tell.
yeah, it's classified, but there's proof on the CIA website. So if being nihilistic makes you feel better, I say go for it. But I also say the planets in their rotation bear testament that there is a God. The fact that the sun and the moon perfectly line up to eclipse, statistically, what are the odds of that? That is proof that there's a God.
Astronomy is
The fact that
interesting. The simulation theory, the idea that, like, if the fact that you got these atheists, that the best solution that they can come up with is that it's a simulation, because it's like, okay, well, I can't handle a God, but I can't explain it, so it's better to say it's not a God, it's just a programmer. But basically, aren't you basically just admitting to it?
simulation theory is just like
It's a gateway drug to
religion
God.
for nerds that don't want to admit that it's mystical. They're like, oh, it's a computer. There's nothing magical or mystical. No, there is magical, mystical stuff.
I'll take
That's
it
not
though.
being such a nerd.
Anything that help. Hey,
Get some cool wizard
someone
powers and
if
channel
someone
your
wants,
energy into a staff and shoot lasers out of it instead of being a nerd like, oh, it's a program.
I have a friend who actually did make a Tesla staff that shoots electricity and gathers electricity from TV antenna UHF signal to charge itself. And so nerds are probably going to be our best case scenario.
That is actually so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
How much money for one of those? I want that for the apocalypse. I want to be casting wizard spells at people. Are you kidding me?
We're going to talk
I
to
want
Jeremiah. You know what? Real quick shout out to Jeremiah, the technician, and we'll get him on pretty soon to talk about this stuff. He's pretty interested in channeling stuff as well, though. He was like, you know what? I don't believe in all this stuff, but I heard about it, so I'll just try it because I'm a science guy. I try things, so I'll experiment. So I just said to myself, like, I would be interested in talking to Nikola Tesla's spirit, or I don't remember exactly what he said, It's like, that sounds, I think I'm making it sound even more weird than it is. But he ended up, after thinking about Tesla, like however he was going about this, literally having thoughts, like visions in his mind. And this is an atheist, right? So he doesn't normally believe in that stuff. He's like, I don't know. Like, I ended up trying these designs that I came up with after thinking, like, I would like to, get in touch with this part of myself or the universe or whatever. And I like that. I like quantum entanglement and the idea that there are, ideas out there beyond material form. Ideas are like looking to emerge as material.
I have some. You keep talking. I'm going to pull up the scripture, something that corresponds to that. Let me just.
I wanted to say to Bijou that, like, we love you and we care. And like, I had a thought about this idea because, like, on one hand, death is relieving. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, if I'm dead, it'll be over, and that's cool. And being alive is really stressful. But I would say, like, I always think about that because I'm Slavic, and I remember that the life of a typical American is 90. Was this like, these are weeks, years, 90 years, and some on your life goes by so quickly. This is in 90 years, your life going by. If you live to 90, this is already not a lot of time. That's all I'm saying. So, like, it's not that long. Like, you can probably, it's kind of like you can hold it like while you're on the car ride kind of a thing. Like, life is short, so you shouldn't really worry about it that way. However, for those of you who do think life is like only this time, you should really use it as efficiently as possible. Because again, the likelihood of you getting to 90 years is unlikely. And the likelihood of at 90 years you being like you are at 30 or 20 is not probable. And the people that we see at 90 who are like coherent, and I know this is like kind of funny, but like Russell P. Nelson, bro. Let me just show you a dude who's too old to play with Legos now because it's like 4 to 99 is the age on Legos. So technically he's a year too old to play with Legos. But I mean, dude, at 100 years old, if you're able to like continue on, like that's pretty impossible for most people to be that coherent. Like I know people that are, you know, in their 50s and 60s are basically unable to think straight anymore. So trying to take care of your body for like the life you have, I think is as important as like trying to prepare for the possibility that it might end up being longer than this like real quick glimpse and, you know, at breathing that you get. And also, yeah, every once in a while, breathe a lot. Like this is a big thing for me, is like do deep breaths and hold your breath sometimes and just think about how crazy it is that you've been allowed to breathe. Like you're on this world and you can breathe. Because if you weren't, you'd be suffocating. It's really hard to even just fathom how crazy it is that you keep getting given another breath. You know what I mean? I don't know if you can appreciate that, but I do that sometimes.
Well, right here I have pulled up Doctrine and Covenants 93 in my quad. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's talking about how the Son was in the beginning of the Father. And it begins to say, "Ye were also in the beginning with the Father, that which is Spirit, even the Spirit of truth." That's talking about us. We were in the beginning with the Father before the creation of the world. Yada yada. And the Spirit of truth is of God. I am the Spirit of truth. And John, yada yada. Man was also in the beginning with God. Intelligence, or the light of truth, was not created or made, neither indeed can be. All truth is independent in that sphere which God has placed it, to act for itself as all intelligence also, otherwise there is no existence. Right? So it's talking about matter and spirit, both being independent things that are co-eternal. For if there was only spirit and everything is just in the mind of God, we're not really real. We're just thoughts in God's mind. However, if everything is just purely material and we're just a combination of chemical reactions, then we also aren't real. But if spirit and matter are both co-eternal, if intelligence cannot be created, then we truly are real. I am that I am. Man, because that was from the beginning, is plainly manifest unto them, that they receive the light. For man is spirit, the elements are eternal, spirit and element inseparably connected, receive a fullness of joy. When they are separated, man cannot receive a fullness of joy. The elements are the tabernacle of God. Yea, man is the tabernacle of God, even temples. And whatsoever temple was defiled, God shall destroy that temple. The glory of God is intelligence. And when you hear this, I want you to switch out intelligence for consciousness to understand that. The glory of God is consciousness. In other words, light and truth. Light and truth forsake the evil one. Every spirit of man was innocent in the beginning, and God, having redeemed man from the fall, then became again in their infant state innocent before God. So to sort of break that down a little bit, it differentiates between spirit intelligence or consciousness and matter, and says that man cannot receive a fullness of joy if those two things are separate. So that goes back to the idea that we are intelligence, we are spirit who is inhabiting this matter body. And that in the resurrection, our consciousness and our physical form become unified as one, right? It says that the elements are the tabernacle of God, because God's spirit is inhabiting a tabernacle, a form which he manifests himself, a form that is like unto ours, but glorified and perfected and spiritual, right? And he's not entirely bound by that. One might say all of the elements in the universe are his tabernacle, not just his form that's like a man. That's how the Spirit of God can manifest outwardly, you know? And it says that man is the tabernacle of God because our intelligence is the same type of consciousness as God's consciousness, right? So our intelligence, our glory, that is the glory of God. Intelligence is the glory of God, right? So we are intelligent beings that are eternally existing alongside God. Now, I used to believe that, and this might still be true, that our consciousness was once a part of God's consciousness, and that's how we're co-eternal with Him. And now I'm leaning more towards that Jesus Christ is the only one that used to be a part of God the Father and Heavenly Mother.
Quakey had a pretty
And
that kind of said that the other day. He posted this whole thing talking about, like, Christ consciousness was never created. It's part of God from the beginning, which is very Vedic. This is so earlier also, just in terms of what Baju was saying, I was thinking about my conversation with Dr. Shiva, and Dr. Shiva as a science Hindu was really interested in the city of anti-entropy, right? And so anti-entropy is, it seems like such a medical term, like if you were to describe health by lack of disease, but anti-entropy is divine order, right? Because it's something so perfectly symmetrical that there's no space in between it. You think about carbon. Carbon could be a pencil lead that's all, like ash or like charcoal, but it could also be a diamond, right? A diamond is just better structure, a more divinely structured with less entropy, stronger structure of the same material, right? So I think that's kind of the way to look at it, is that we might emerge from perfect consciousness, from God's pure, God being, again, because I know some people don't like that word. I get it. It's okay. But it sounds like the divine order that things are that all of material is emerging from is perfectly ordered. And then from there, it has to be separate in order for it to become all the things that we are and everything that can uplift, because we're making these choices. Material choices have karma, which are uplifting. Doing the right thing has further consequences. Doing the wrong thing does have consequences. And so you can't just live in constant destruction and chaos and entropy, because it further creates further entropy and destroys order. And we're trying to build back to a state of like complete complexity with singularity and order.
you want to know my idea on that? So the entropy, you talk about that destruction. Actually, not destruction. I think the natural state of the universe is darkness and chaos, right? That it's chaotic matter and chaotic intelligence. And chaos leads to, if you understand how chaos magic works in like manifestation and witchcraft stuff, the symbol that has all the arrows pointing outwards, it's infinite possibilities. So I believe from the infinite possibilities, one of those possibilities is intelligence, is consciousness. And that great intelligence, that great consciousness is the force of God that brings order to the darkness and to the universe. And that God's glory, this is my work and my glory, to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man, is us being exalted, becoming one with God, and spreading that light of truth across the chaos of the universe, that the universe is infinite darkness, and that our intelligence is spreading infinite light across the infinite darkness, organizing it. So it goes to that sort of yin-yang type of idea of entropy versus anti-entropy, except for I would say that the chaotic, maybe one might say even bad side, is the natural state of the universe. That way God doesn't create evil. He creates the order which opposes evil, and evil is self-existent.
Last time we were pretty much at the end here. I just wanted to ask a couple more things. Anything else you wanted to cover? But I had one more question, which was last time we talked a bit about the idea of like demons not necessarily being like wicked per se, like they're just not good. Let's say like clockwork elves is maybe a better model. Like, what do you think about that? Like in terms of, tempting spirits and things that are not trying to make the world a better place. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I certainly think that demons, in regards to the fallen angels that follow Lucifer, are more evil than we can possibly imagine, right? I think that Satan is miserable and wants to make all men miserable like unto himself. I also think that there may be other spiritual beings more neutral, how there's a spectrum of evil. But I do think that, because we don't know how long ago the war in heaven was, we don't know how long ago Lucifer was cast out. I think that the fact that they have been in this state for so long has truly twisted them. And if you've ever encountered anything demonic, you understand that feeling, that terror that you feel that is unexplainable, that it is something truly evil that you can't describe. With the clockwork elves, I think that while they may act innocent sometimes, I truly don't trust them whatsoever. That's why I would never take DMT. I know I can have visions and things that come true without taking drugs. I've experienced that stuff. And I absolutely do not trust the DMT elves. I think that DMT basically just opens up your mind, opens up your spiritual perception beyond the veil. And like we were saying, when you receive the endowment of power from God, the veil is sort of thinned and it opens you up to both angels and demons. So with DMT, the way I see it, it's like forcing those doors open before you're ready, before you can perceive what is good and what is evil. And so
this is definitely an acid trip. I'll tell you what. Looking at all these Solomonic demons, they're pretty friggin' like whatever drugs they were on. I'll tell you.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I think that many of the things that you see when you're on drugs are truly real, and that is what's more terrifying. It's easy to say, "Oh, you were just hallucinating." But
yeah, that's a pretty weird.
You were seeing real things.
Oh, I hallucinate.
Terrifying.
Yeah, like if you hallucinate, like a unicorn with flies around it or a triple head, like if you see this stuff, like, and you can just pawn it off on hallucinating, good for you. I don't know what else to say. There are a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I must have just seen an MTV music video. I don't know, like how they could just kind of relax.
Honestly, like with the elves acting playful things. I mean, you know what they say? The devil appears as an angel of light. Do you know what happens when you ask the machine elves about Jesus Christ?
No, I've never done it. What happens?
Look it up. Google that right now. Pull that up.
Ask machine elves about Jesus Christ. Okay. Okay. I've read maybe 4 different posts across the internet that DMT entities are friendly, helpful. They turn hostile immediately when asked about Jesus Christ. Really?
Yeah.
I would like someone to I'm sorry, I didn't say that. But someone who's done this, can someone let us know? If anybody who does this in their lives has had an experience like this, unprompted, please let us know. We don't want to prompt you to try this. Also, that wouldn't be a scientific test, right? Because then now you're thinking about it. But if this has happened to you, let us know, because like that's really interesting. Oh my gosh, that would be
if you ever run into a DMT entity, just try and shake their hand and see what happens.
Yeah, like fundamentally, anytime you're dealing with anything weird, it would be worth it to ask them about Jesus. I'm curious about that because it does seem like that's kind of the test, but I wonder about that because it's not even his name, right? So what is the deal with this? Bothers me. This is a major contention in my life. When we talk about Yeshua and then he's called Jesus, right? Like what are we sure that it's okay to just refer to him by someone else's name? Like what is about that?
Well, here's what I think. So I don't remember what Doctrine and Covenants it is, but Jesus accepts the title Jehovah, right, to Joseph Smith. When Joseph Smith prayed to God the Father, he prayed in the name of Jesus. He knows who we're talking about when we say Jesus. It's not like the name Yeshua itself is some sort of necessarily mystical thing. It is the being which it is attached to. And the name Jesus is attached to Yahweh, Yahweh, Jehovah, the son of El Elyon, son of God Most High. We believe that's attached to him. It is a connection to him. So I do believe the name has power.
Yeah, this guy, House of Jehovah, saying names are important in Judaism, and that's true for sure. I think that's something we should probably consider. I agree with Chad that the person is the most important thing, but I also can see how it'd probably be easy to, over thousands of years, shift a character out of Yeshua. If you wanted to create, like, first you start calling him something different, then you start making him look slightly different, and then you start saying that, he used to race F-150s at NASCAR. Like, it's not hard to imagine how you could change Jesus into somebody else. And that's all right. See, like, that's the thing. When I say Jesus, I'm thinking of a slightly different thing because I have this American context. But if I were to say Joshua or Yeshua, all of a sudden I'm thinking of his association with Joshua, even Joseph,
Yeah.
even
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because, like, what about the name God? Saying God. Do you want
Joseph
God
even
comes
Joseph.
from? Comes from the Norse god Odin.
Right. It means like
God is literally.
it means damned Odin, which is weird because damned meant like cursed blessed or something like that.
Right.
There's a lot of weirdness
So,
about that. Calling a cursed
so the
demon
English word
kind of thing.
El, I mean the Hebrew word El Elyon, Elohim, it has nothing to do with the English word God. But I'm sure when you pray to God in the name of Jesus, He knows what you're talking about, right? He listens. And I think
Still,
that
if
when
you
you talk
called
to
him
the,
the Elyon, I think that might help because then you'd visualize El Elyon.
that's a good thing. I'll pray to El Elyon in the name of Yahweh. But
We should test that out.
I think that with the DMT entities, it's the fact of the person that you're bringing up, not necessarily the name of Christ, but who you are bringing up. They know who you're talking about, and they're outraged when you bring them up.
Yeah. Well, let's do another show pretty soon. I'm going to send everyone off your way. Everybody, make sure you guys go to Latter Day Chad on Instagram and check out his reels. Do you have anything you wanted me to pull up here? Because I know you've been putting some pretty cool reels up recently too.
Let me see. Scroll down a little bit. Let me see. Actually, there's one I can think of. You're gonna have to scroll down a while for it. Quite a while. Keep going. Keep going. I'll tell you when. Okay, up. So middle left. Okay, up one more. The one that looks sort of blank above the people in the car. To the no, not that one. That one's cool. When Joseph Smith predicted the meteor shower. That one.
That's pretty sweet.
Okay, play that with sound on.
Oh, okay. Hold on one second.
Love that one. Yeah, my non-member friend said that was the coolest one on my page.
Reported a day when someone came and asked Joseph. It had happened hundreds of times. "Who are you?" He replied, "Noah came before the flood. I have come before the fire."
That reminds me, I had to show this one I saw the other day, which is like, anytime anyone tells me something's impossible, I'm gonna show them this.
So here's everyone's homework for tonight. Go to YouTube. You could pull up YouTube and show them this.
Yeah, it's because they might
YouTube.
not have seen it before, and just make sure they know what it looks like. Here, guys, this is what YouTube looks like.
So type in, what did Josiah reform? Margaret Barker. It'll be a BYU video. Watch that video tonight and put that into the context of the Book of Mormon. Read the Book of Mormon. This is what's going on in the time period of the Book of Mormon. There are these people altering the scriptures, removing the Son of God from the text. That is why the Book of Mormon exists, so that to bear testament to the Jews and the Gentiles that Jesus is the Christ. And this shows exactly how it does that historically. And this is by a non-Mormon scholar who is researching the origins of Christianity and drawing it to this religion. And we're actually going to be interviewing an author about this about next week. Read that. Read about Messiah ben Joseph and the gathering of Israel, and then read the Book of Mormon.
And check out the Tartary Nova Discord, which I just pulled up on the screen here. Make sure you guys join that. You can click through the tartarynova.com to join. You can ask us questions and check out the X-Church conversation, Latterwave. All right, Chad.
And Precious Things talks about that same reform. But yeah.
Show me that book again one more time. Show the book.
Yeah, Plain and Precious Things by Dave Butler.
Yeah,
We're interviewing him next week.
We're gonna be
And
showing Butler
here's his
off.
other
It's gonna be
book
pretty cool.
that you have to read second, The Goodness and the Mysteries, that really breaks down the Book of Mormon, how it's a temple text, all the symbolism of it, about passing through the veil and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Actually, he's really cool. Just for people who don't know who David Butler is, I'm gonna show them for a second. David Butler, writer. Well, you can see right here. Here's him talking with the Stick of Joseph group right here. He's a writer, and he does like awesome. I mean, one thing you'll find is that Mormon sci-fi is a huge thing. There's a lot of Mormon sci-fi writers that are like the best sci-fi writers ever. It blows my mind, actually. But also his historical knowledge and everything. And his deep understanding of spirituality and of the temple lore. It's going to be a really great conversation. So do look forward to that next week. He's well read, well written. It's going to be an awesome show.
Thank you, House of Jehovah, for saying I'm your favorite teacher. I appreciate it.
Dude. Yeah. You know what? And dare I say, God bless you all. Take care. Good night.
Next up, call up, let's go, saints. Guided by faith where the universe paints. Celestial saints and a cosmic grace.